Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Well, the Chinese People's Liberation Army or PLA will retreat to its base east of Finger 8 on the north bank of Pangong Lake. The Indian Army will move back to its permanent position near Finger 3 and neither side will patrol the contested areas in between until an agreement is reached through future talks, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh told Parliament on Thursday, explaining the nuances of a disengagement plan hammered out by the two armies to reduce military tensions in eastern Ladakh. Until now, rival soldiers have been deployed eyeball to eyeball on the Finger 4 ridgeline at heights of almost 18,000 feet. In a detailed statement on the situation in eastern Ladakh, Singh told Rajya Sabha and later Lok Sabha that the next meeting between senior military commanders of the two armies to discuss other issues will take place 48 hours after complete disengagement in the Pangong Lake area, both north and south banks. Singh told both houses that India did not concede anything during the military talks and added that there were still some outstanding issues regarding deployment and patrolling at some other points along the LAC, and these will be the focus of further discussions with the Chinese side. In this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the fragile situation at the LAC. Joining me on the program today are Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired, Director, India Foundation, and Harshvi Pant, Head Strategic Studies, Observer Research Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. General, let me begin the program with you. A lot has been made about how India has lost out on territory, especially in the region, to China. The Defence Minister has very categorically stated that we have not conceded anything. Take us through, the fragile situation that really exists right now at the LAC and what really goes into these kind of military talks.
Thank you, Frank. First, let me start with what exactly is meant by losing territory to the Chinese. I think that we need to understand that the Aksai Chin area, we lost to the Chinese a very, very long time ago. That was in the 50s itself, and they built a road through that. And then a part of occupied Kashmir was given by the Pakistanis, the 5,000 plus square kilometers, to the Chinese. Subsequently, post the 62 conflict, we had where the ceasefire took place between the two sides. We came to what is called the line of actual control. And various talks have taken place. But unfortunately, on the ground, this particular line of actual control has never been defined or demarcated or even maps exchanged. So what we are looking at is where the Indian Army is deployed, wherever it is deployed, whether it is in Arunachal or whether it is in Ladakh, from those deployment areas, it has a perception that the Indian territory, the line of actual control, runs up to this particular point. And from where the Chinese are deployed, they have a perception that it runs up to their particular point. Now, in between is that area where, in between the two forces, is where all the problems lie. So whenever we see Chinese patrols coming into that area, we look on it as an intrusion by the Chinese into our area. And when our patrols go into the same area, likewise, the Chinese view it as an intrusion. But on the ground, when we look at any territory per se lost, that I would think it refers to any posts or any positions which are held being lost. Now, that has not really been the case. What has really happened over the years, and I'm not just talking about since post-62, I'm talking about the period for the, say, last 25 to 30 years. What has been happening is that the Chinese have been making very gradual encroachments into that area, especially into the areas which were not held. Now, the problem was that we didn't have any roads leading up to the line of actual control, whereas the Chinese have built the roads right up to that line. So when they would intrude, say, 500 meters or 200 meters, these intrusions over the years became big intrusions. Now, what has happened in the last 4 to 5 years, I would say, a great deal of stress has been laid by the government of India to actually build our infrastructure forward, and there are better observation facilities available. So now when they try any of these attempts to do what is popularly called salami slicing, they are confronted by the Indian forces. Now, this is what we saw in Doklam. This is actually what happened. So when they tried to make a road through Bhutanese territory, then we stopped them, and the face-off took place, which took about 2 months to resolve, 2 to 3 months to resolve. Now, the same salami slicing again they did this year, and they took advantage of the fact of the COVID, the Chinese COVID, which had spread. So, because of that, the Indian troops, which generally carry out their exercises in this area, they did not carry out their exercise or that forward deployment because the Chinese used to do it, but we didn't do it this time because of the COVID, and that gave them an opportunity to occupy certain of those unheld areas, and that led to the clash in Galwan. Right now, post that, when they were forced to withdraw, and then of course the killings took place, we lost 20 of our soldiers, and in the retaliation, the Chinese, I believe, as per one reports, the Russian reports, they lost 45. The American reports say they lost more than 100 men. But this is what really is the ground situation. Now, when we look into the one of the sectors, there are many sectors, but I only want to talk about Pangong Tso. When we are looking at the Pangong Tso sector, north of Pangong Tso, we talk of areas called Fingers 1 to Fingers 8.
Right.
Now, at Finger 3, we have got our post, which has been a long-standing post. And east of Finger 8, the Chinese have their post, which is again a long-standing post. Now, what the Chinese have done over a period of time, especially during the Kargil conflict when the troops weren't there, they built a road which went right up to Finger 4, from Finger 8 to Finger 4.
Sure.
So when we are looking at what really happened is they have the advantage of communications, and subsequently they build up their post in Finger 5. Now
Right.
the Indian side told them to go back. So this is really what the situation is, that they have set up their establishment at Finger 5, whereas they should be behind Finger 8. We went up to Finger 4. Both the troops are now facing off at Finger 4, as you had mentioned.
Sure.
And now the pullback has to start. So we will move back from Finger 4 to Finger 3, and they will move back from Finger 4 to, they will dismantle what they had done in Finger 5 and go back to the east of Finger 8.
Right.
Now, just one small thing. When we are looking to the south of Pangong Tso, there we occupied the ridge called the famous Kailash Ridge, which overlooks the complete area.
Right.
And that perturbed the Chinese. And then a lot of mobile warfare took place, mobile elements. That means the tanks were deployed by both the sides. So what we have seen already withdrawing as of now is the tanks from both sides have withdrawn on the southern side. But I think the withdrawal on the northern side is going to take a long period of time because there is no trust. There is a great deal of trust deficit.
Sure.
The Indian military cannot trust the Chinese. So everything will have to be verified, and we are waiting for a very, very long winter for this particular process. Frank.
Okay. All right, General. Thank you for taking us through the process there and taking us through the terrain too of this particular fragile region or territory. All right, Ambassador, let me bring you in now. So the military talks are on. The military is doing its bit. In such a situation, what is the role of diplomats and diplomacy?
Well, Indian diplomacy has worked overtime to make it clearer to countries which surround China that it is going to be them also in one way or another. In other words, we have tried to sound out the rest of the world about the dangers which emanate from China, and we have sensitized them to what we have done to take on the Chinese dragon. Now, in particular, we have been at pains to emphasize to the new Biden administration that China cannot be trusted. Now, if you recall, China was waiting for Biden to take over and was expecting Joe Biden to take a softer line towards the People's Republic of China. That has not happened. President Biden has put in place a new administration which is going to be tough on China. He has recently, just 2 days ago, told a group of senators in an official meeting that he needs to upgrade US infrastructure because the danger from China needs to be confronted head on. He said, in fact, that unless we are serious, China will eat our lunch. In other words, the dangers from China are becoming clearer to the rest of the world. Indian diplomacy has been very actively engaged in sensitizing other countries in this regard. The Accord has taken place, has taken firmer shape, and I think by and large, China, which is a country which never gives in, China realizes that India has more friends who matter than China itself has. And the Indian army is standing ground. The Indian political leadership has shown the will that it will stay on and take on the dragon head on. And therefore, I think China has realized that it needs to buckle down. Unfortunately, in some sections of the Indian media, things are being projected as if the Chinese has got away with some Indian territory, etc. But the fact of the matter is that it is China which has caved in. It is China which has realized that international pressure is working against it and that India is not giving it. So I think it has been a success for the government of India and a success for the Indian army and also for Indian diplomacy.
All right. Professor R.V. Pant, let me bring you into the picture now. So let's also talk about, since the ambassador was raising this issue of how the US has decided to take on China head on, what are the dangers posed by China to India? Why is it important for us too to take on China head on in all domains across spheres?
Frank, this has been, I think, one of those stories where for the first time in a long time, perhaps, we have seen the whole of government approach to managing China. And I think that is very important because we are looking at military action on the ground. We are looking at diplomatic action from our diplomats. We are looking at economic measures that government has taken over a period of time. So I think what has happened is a very calibrated approach to the China problem, to the question that India was facing on the border. Now, for India, it has become almost impossible to go back to the old sort of semblance of normalcy that was there between China and India, because China has been provoking India now for a very long time. And what happened in Galwan last year, actually upended almost all the assumptions on which a Sino-Indian relationship was resting. And I think the message from the Indian government has been very consistent and very robust, that howsoever hard China might try, we cannot delink the border issue from the larger issue of Sino-Indian relations. None of the other aspects of Sino-Indian relations will move forward unless the border issue remains where it is. And I think that is a very important message that has gone out, because the earlier assumption was that let's carry on talking about border issues, let's carry on talking about these talks about talks, while we continue to trade with each other, while we continue to have multilateral cooperation, whatever that's worth for. But I think this time the government made it very clear, and I think that was very significant move, because that has reverberations across the region. Now, when as Ambassador Dayal was saying, there is a sense that countries that are relatively weaker can stand up to a bully like China, and that has important implications for even smaller countries in the region. That is a message that perhaps has gone out. And that is a message that has been heard also in Washington, that if India is standing up, then America also has to reckon that, you cannot have business as usual. So there is a continuity from Trump to Mr. Biden. But I think the larger picture that we are witnessing today is this larger acceptance of this reality that China has become a problem issue for the world, for the region. And this problem has to be tackled at multiple levels, from domestic politics, from domestic economic issues to wider strategic and military issues. And I think that has been a remarkable shift, a remarkable development, not only for Indian diplomacy, but I think for the global politics as well.
Absolutely. All right. General, let me go back to a point that you're making in your opening remark. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now. You spoke about the Kailash Ridge and how India has, taken up dominant positions there. In such a situation, especially at a time when we cannot trust China, should we, cede and go back to our previously held positions before April 2020?
Now, the Kailash Ridge actually is one thing which has which is taking up a lot of conversation space in the strategic sphere. Now, it is the advantage of holding on to the Kailash Ridge is that so long as you are on that Kailash Ridge, you've got total dominance of the area on the north bank of the Pangong Tso and on the northern shores of of the north, even on the southern bank, the area towards the north. Now, but let us face it, at some point of time, if we want to have a rapprochement or we want to get ahead with the talks, I think a pullback will be required. But this pullback can only take place after the complete normalcy retains on the northern bank. That means the Chinese have moved lock, stock, and barrel from the north bank back to finger 8, on the east of finger 8. Having said that, the second point of it is, I think, which we'll have to, which the military, I'm quite certain, will be looking into. If the need comes to reoccupy the Kailash Ridge, we should be in a position to reoccupy it before the Chinese do. So I think these are the two parameters on which the military will base its future course of action. You will have to position troops very close to that area, and any threat, I mean, the surveillance has to be top rate. So any signs of forward movement by the Chinese, you've got to act first and get onto those ridges and ensure that the Chinese don't get in. I think this is the way we will have to go about it. But at some point of time, if we wish to, we cannot continue with the present state of impasse for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years. That I think is a non-starter. But if the Chinese get the message, if they behave, well, I think we should be, I think it's a risk which we can take.
Okay, so in a situation like this, especially when tempers are high and the temperatures are soaring as well, it's important to give and take to ensure that we get the best kind of result, is what you're suggesting. Ambassador, let me come across to you now. Let's also talk about what's at stake for India while taking on China, and also thereby sending out a message to the world and some of our friends and allies too.
Well, China is going to be a country which will pose problems for us. There is no doubt in my mind that it will do whatever possible to create difficulties for us, either directly or through its all-weather friend, Pakistan. So we have to be always on guard where China is concerned. But of course, to counter China, you must first of all need to strengthen your own defense capabilities. You have to strengthen your economy. And as regards foreign policy, you have to make the right kind of friends. Now, my own view is that we can't go it alone when it comes to be able to cope up to the danger from China. In that context, the military exercises which we've been having with the United States, and also naval exercises which we have been having with other members of the Quad, can become a very significant factor. Because once China realizes that India is not alone, then it will be more careful as regards how it approaches the India question. China is facing its own difficulties too. The Chinese army is to a very great extent a conscript army. And from what I hear, Chinese conscript soldiers are not happy at all that while they were required officially to stay for 2 years in the hostile terrain of the India-China line of actual control, they are now required to overstay and be there longer, in fact, for 3 years. So there are a lot of reasons why within the Chinese army there's unhappiness. It is not as if China is a monolith. It tries to give the appearance of being all-powerful. It tries to do everything which a bully can. But we have shown the resolve that we will stand up to China. And what is important is that we should continue to sensitize other countries, particularly those which are near the South China Sea and which have direct dangers coming from the mainland China, particularly Australia, Japan, all the ASEAN countries. One way or another, they are all threatened